Welcome to the Heal with Kelly podcast. I'm Kelly Noonan-Gorse, and every week I speak to the leading doctors, healers, spiritual teachers, and scientists to find out what is truly possible when it comes to healing. I also interview real people with extraordinary healing stories. My philosophy is, what's possible for one is possible for all. Thank you for joining me on this beautiful journey of remembering our divine nature and tapping into the truths that shall set us free. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Heal with Kelly podcast. I'm so excited for the conversation today. I'm here with my new friend, Karena Dawn, who is a New York Times best-selling author and the founder of Tone It Up, the world's largest female fitness platform and nutrition company. In addition to TIU, Karena is a leading advocate for mental health and wellness. When she was 11, Karena's mom was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, and she spent most of her life being raised by someone suffering from severe mental illness, living through many adverse and traumatic experiences, and finally healing from her own situational depression. Karena's mother passed away in September of 21, and she has made it her mission to raise awareness around the stigma surrounding mental health and providing resources to those close to loved ones that may be suffering. To amplify this mission and break the silence, Karena founded The Big Silence, a charitable foundation dedicated to mental health. Karena also hosts the Big Silence podcast, which I was just a guest on, which is a top-rated nonprofit mental health podcast named among the 8 best mental health and wellness podcasts to learn the latest science in nutrition, fitness, and mental wellness. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. So excited to sit here and hang with you again.
I know. Oh, well, I have to say, I read, as I try to do for every interview, I read your book, which is called The Big Silence. It is a beautiful book, beautiful cover, and just such a raw and personal memoir of really your life growing up with your mom who had severe mental illness. It's pretty, I just want to start off by, I don't know, the courage that it took to kind of open yourself up to this type of vulnerability to help others is really admirable.
Thank you. Yeah, it actually took me 5 years to write it. It was more like a journal for therapy, and it can be pretty heavy. I didn't want to leave anything out because 'tis life. And the people that have come to me after reading it and like, oh my gosh, I had that same experience. I had no clue. Like, this really helped me realize that I'm not alone. Yeah, it was tough. And I think when you were here in Austin, I had just finished the audiobook portion. So that's coming out.
Oh, cool. Oh, good. I know. I was like, is the audio out yet? Because I'm cramming and I need to listen to it while I'm driving, but I actually prefer to read like the hard copies. So it's great.
Yeah, I think we talked about that. I like hard copies too, but the audio, actually, my friend who's a therapist, after each section, she deep dives into like a therapy session with me. So there's bonus footage too.
Whoa, that's cool. That's amazing, actually. What a great kind of differentiator. So cool.
Yeah.
So do you want to just give, for our audience that don't know your backstory, maybe kind of the Reader's Digest version of what you went through and what brought you to do the work you're doing today, and then we can get into that.
Yeah. So what I went through, I grew up in Indiana in the 90s. I was a teenager in the 90s. And when my mother was diagnosed, we didn't know she had a mental illness at the time, but she was in and out of the household. She was a missing persons for several times. We had private investigators trying to find her. She was a Jane Doe at hospitals. And I learned in the 90s what mental illness was, even though nobody was talking about it. And that was when my mom was the longest Jane Doe a hospital had at that time. And we found her and we went to visit her in the hospital, and she was hooked up to all these IVs and medications. And it was really heavy for me as a kid because even though they're like, hey, your mom is diagnosed with schizophrenia, no one really was beyond that conversation. No one was really having a conversation. So when you're a 12, 13-year-old, you're just like, okay, I literally went to the library and couldn't even spell the word, and found a book and had to educate myself on what mental illness was and what schizophrenia was. So that, as you mentioned, led me into my own situational depression, drug misuse, Escapism, suicide and teenage suicide survivor. And I'm so happy I'm here. And that's kind of led me how I got into the fitness industry as my healing process. And then with the big silence on giving back and making sure people don't have to suffer.
It's amazing. I'm just, I wrote a book and I'm a writer, and it's clear that you are too. You're so creative. You write, there's poetry you wrote in the book, or that you included in the book at the beginning of these chapters, that you wrote when you were, like 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 years old. That is quite profound. So
Yeah.
I,
Yeah. It's crazy. So I have all of my journals from a kid. Somehow I moved to California when I was in LA for 20 years. Somehow, and all of the moving in those 20 years, I have kept all of my journals as a kid. So when I was writing the book, I could go reference all of that. And then I could my sister, her poetry's in there. My dad is a therapist and a musician. And so his music, my sister's poetry, I had all of these resources, and I would talk to my dad and my sister to help me fill in those little blank spots. I'm like, what happened here? So it was a family affair.
yeah, I love that you included your dad's lyrics too. I'm like, who is this Nick Ivanovich or what? I don't know. Like, and then later, I think like a few chapters in, your mom addresses your dad as Nick, and I was like, oh, that makes sense. It's the dad.
Yeah.
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 So, what is the big silence? Like, what are you taking from your experience and offering to people today? Because there is obviously, throughout history, there's challenges in the collective that cause people to, whether it's war, World War II, the Depression, all these things. But right now, we're in another intense window of, like, because of social media, because of COVID and isolation, massive uptick in suicide and severe mental illness.
Yeah. So the reason I called it was the big silence is because it's the things we don't talk about enough, and how we want to break the silence. And so I founded the Big Silence Foundation in 2021. I was my mother's caretaker the last 5 years of her life. And, she struggled with her own mental illness and not wanting to have medication. She was later diagnosed with depression and NPD and narcissistic personality disorder, all the things. All
Super
the
fun.
things.
Super fun.
Yeah. And I remember we talked about this, like the end of the book, it's like, and now the healing begins for me even. But the big silence is just opening up that conversation, because I suffered in silence so much. My mother suffered in silence, my sister, my family. And once you realize you raise your voice and actually speak about mental health, and you actually save lives and create community, and others feel more comfortable. And even me having a voice, because in the beginning of founding Tone It Up, I was embarrassed of my past and everything I'd done. And it was such a time where it's like, oh no, you have to be this perfect fitness role model. Can't talk about the things I did in my past. And I felt very like I was holding something in, like I wasn't being my true authentic self by holding these things in. And so once I started talking about where my struggles and where I'd come from, my relationship with my mother, that then, spirals with relationship with family, relationship and with love. And once I started talking about this, it actually started unraveling. Even Tone It Up community members opening up about stories, or meeting new people, talking, and people wanting to finally be able to talk about it without the stigma. So, and also I will say my mom, who didn't want her meds, didn't want to talk about her mental illness, when I was with her the last 3 days of her life, she finally said, yeah, it's not just my physical health, it's mental. And I told her everything we're doing for the Big Silence. And I told her about the book, about the foundation, about our programs. And I said, this is dedicated to you, Mom. And she said, okay.
Oh,
So,
wow. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you have, even just like at the end of the book, the lessons that you have learned, and it's that balance of really looking at our challenges as things that shape us. And so while we want to feel sorry for ourselves, and I, might have wished I had a different grandpa or a different dad, and you wish you had had a healthy mom, like, and all of these things. They've also, all of those things were the fire that shaped us into the strong women, resilient women, witty women, you know, business women, whatever we are today because of those experiences. So can you talk a little bit about like that fine line of like real like acceptance, getting to a place of acceptance and gratitude, and like, yeah, we have a right to feel sorry for ourselves in a moment, but at the same time, life is just such a beautiful, rich work of art that, you know, makes, it's like that chaos, there's beauty and order in the chaos.
Yeah. And I'll go back to those last 3 days with my mom in hospice and the things that we were talking about. And aside from her and I actually being able to talk about her mental illness and how it wasn't her fault, it went to the conversation of, you know, in her passing, she's like, I regret this. I regret this. And to actually be able to have a conversation with my mother of, Mom, this is not your fault. Mental illness is a disease of the brain. And I wish we could have done something more. I wish we could have healed you. But don't regret, because I love the woman I became today. And that's because of you. That is because of what your struggles were. And I had struggles and all of this. But for me, of who I've been able to become is because of my mother. And so if she perhaps went through those very, very hard times of homelessness and this, and just, you know, it's a really difficult life, to be able to then be able to use my voice so that it doesn't have to continue generation after generation.
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
that is, yeah.
you're the pattern breaker. You're the ancestral healer that's gonna disrupt the pattern in the line.
I mean, I'll do my best to help. You know, I've always wanted to give back and help others heal, because I feel like I'm in a really good place now.
Yeah. What I think one of the most profound, because I can relate a little bit to escapism through certain things, but you talk about you're so open about your drug use and escaping in your early 20s, and in Hollywood and in LA. And like, how did you, for you to like wake up at some point and realize and then make that shift out of that and kind of into fitness, like the healthier escapism, you know, what, like, talk about that, you know, realization a little bit, because I think it's so relatable for people and also may inspire them if they're doing some version of that in their own lives today, whether it's, you know, any of the escapes that we take right now, the addictions that we have.
Yeah. I think my biggest note on that is listen to that voice, that tiny little voice that you trust so much, right? Like, you know, and then sometimes you push it away, but it's still there, your instinct. And somehow in my early 20s, because I was, you know, all of my teens into early 20s, just in this dark place. And in early 20s is after a three-day bender, woke up in a park. And trust me, then the depression sets in. I come down, and it was that little voice, which I think was like coming over time. But finally, I was like, this is not you, Karena. This is not what life is meant to be. And I always say it's harder to make a positive change than to stay in your old patterns. Old patterns are easy to, you know, just give up. Old patterns, you know, you don't have to break them, but to actually make change. And it was really hard, and it's a lifelong journey too. So from there, when I was like, I'm not doing this anymore, there's something greater, there's something greater. Okay, let me think back when I was my happiest. A kid. Okay, what did I do as a kid? Kids are like our greatest lessons, where it's pure joy. And I was like, okay, I loved to run. Well, when I was 11, I ran my first half marathon, and it made me so happy. I hated running, but I loved crossing that finish line and accomplishing something. And so for many, many years, I thought I would become like my mother. And then I decided to make that decision. I was like, I am not my mother. I'm going to try very hard to take care of myself, to make sure I'm mentally well, And so I signed up for a triathlon and trained for that. Hated every moment. But it was that finish line. And then it was that finish line where I crossed that finish line. I did find joy in sometimes running. I'm not a big swimmer per se in the ocean, but I did find that running became my therapy, and bike riding. And then crossing that finish line at the end of the race was the first time in my life. This is in San Diego. First time in my life that I set out to do something and I did it. And it's that little simple thing. It's like, I signed up for this. I trained for it. I did it. I passed the finish line. And in that moment was when I was like, okay, I can do anything. So that was where it went from 0 to keep going, keep pushing.
Yeah. And then where did Tone It Up come in? How did that come to be?
Yeah. So then from there, when I had this transition and fitness, I traded in Hollywood clubs for sunrise surf sessions or runs and all that stuff. And fitness. And I always, even as a little kid, I wanted to be, my mom used to work out to Jane Fonda and Kathy Smith and all the VHS tapes. And I was like, one day I want to be like that. And so I got my certifications for training and personal training. And at the time I was already traveling the world with triathlon and working in sports and fitness and hosting. And then I met Katrina at the gym. So then we started talking and hanging out, and we had this different unique ways of how fitness had saved our lives. And we're like, let's do this. Let's start Tone It Up together. And it was pre-Instagram. Fitness was not on YouTube yet. And we just started making videos on the beach. And I think back then our biggest message was making fitness fun. And that was really what we wanted, because we needed fun in our life. Everybody needs fun. And so then Tone It Up began.
Oh, it's so great. And it is, just training for the triathlon to break that pattern. It is easier to go back to your old ways, to escape, to not feel. But like when you commit to something and not only, especially something like fitness or changing the way you eat, all of these things, or getting better sleep, just any of the fundamental pillars of health and wellness, not only do you feel so accomplished and so proud when you follow through, or, if you've even like stopped drinking, like for me to like think of not drinking alcohol is so daunting, but like once you get through like a few weeks, a few months, you start to feel so good in your body that you don't want to go back. So like the fitness, when you're running, when you're training, when you're doing something every day, just the biochemistry in your body shifts, and you start to feel so much better. But it's just a matter of like doing it. Or when you're eating so much better, it seems so daunting to like, oh God, I don't give up bread or something. And then all of a sudden, if you do it long enough, you start to feel so much better, and then you make better choices unconsciously because your body is leading your subconscious mind as the body is leading you. So I just love that example, because that's what disrupts patterns. That's what changes habits.
Yeah. And I would challenge anyone listening too, if you don't want to move your body for 4 days, 5 days, and see if then you are going to bed the night before and waking up the morning after being like, I can't wait to work out again. Maybe eating, it's like those cravings, like the fried food, I love me some fried food, and I have some, but I don't, not, it's all within balance, but it's just those little habits that seem really hard become so easy again.
Yeah. With your, you talk a lot about your relationship, your marriage to Bobby in the book. And, so much of our childhood relationships determine who we are attracted to or grasp onto or seek out in the world, to be the parent kind of that we didn't have, And how did you learn, with all the hurt and abandonment that you experienced because of your mother's mental illness, how did you learn to trust and love again? Like that is, even me, which I didn't have that extreme of an example, I still have massive trust issues,
Yeah. Yeah. So to give context, so I grew up with my mom, who she actually used me as her confidant, and all of her delusions with schizophrenia. She would tell me it was my dad was part of this antichrist group to take over the world. Don't trust him. Don't do this. Don't trust my friend's parents. Don't that like, and at that young age, you actually believe it. And I think that was the hardest thing for me to work through was the trust issues and to learn how to let love in again, because I believed my mom. My mom was everything. I'm like, okay, she trusts to come to me. I'm a young girl. Everything your mom says at that time is you believe it. And so then once she disappeared, just think, okay, mom walks to the corner store and disappears for the first time. She abandoned me once. And then, there's multiple times of abandonment. So that was my biggest thing to work through is abandonment issues and trust issues. And to be able to then as a kid, you don't feel like you're worthy of being loved because this person that you trusted and thought loved you keeps abandoning you, and that's where a lot of therapy came in. And it was really hard for me to be in a stable relationship, to feel worthy, to love my body, respect my body. And I would say I went through some relationships that were not mentally healthy, not good. And then I don't know, somehow, even in the beginning of Bobby, I was like, no, I don't want to be in a relationship. That like,
Yeah.
I don't need you. I'm independent. It was rocky, but we've been together 13 years now. And uh, I know that he loves me and I'm able to love again. And I trust him. And that's just a lot of inner work. I mean, even for you, what kind of work have you had to do to trust?
Oh my gosh, it's every day. I think it all comes back to like awareness like being aware of, and I'll probably be doing this work to the day I leave the physical body, right? It's like a full unfolding. But it's just becoming aware and like seeing the more awareness you can practice and the more when you can see when catch yourself getting triggered or catch
Mhm.
yourself grasping or catching yourself manipulating to get some sort of like love hit or words of affirmation or whatever it is to fill that insecure cup that you have. It's just becoming aware and going, okay, hold on a minute, and coming back to, I am safe, I'm okay, like I am worthy, I am like, it just takes practice and really just holding that scared part of myself
Yeah.
and really like reparenting myself in the moment as these things come up and then practicing that like non-attachment, like really like I'm grasping to feel safe, but all of that safety is an illusion. I have to find safety and worth and love within myself, and only then can I really have intimacy and connect and like, you know,
Yeah.
real relationship.
Yeah, I agree with that. And finding the love for self. And yeah, I struggled with that too. And I also will just be like, intimacy for me is really hard because I've had to be so protective. And, uh, and it is even today when I talk about abandonment issues, I can now, through what I've done in the work, and I have a moment when recently, like a year ago, something happened and, you know, my abandonment issues showed up.
Stirred up, yep.
They were there. I was like, okay, I can recognize this. I know what to do. I am safe. It's okay. I'm going to be fine. This is, you can get through anything, but it's not as much of a struggle anymore. But when you can actually recognize like what your reactions are coming from.
Yeah, and just this awareness now with social media and what the work that I'm doing is like becoming aware of how much I'm seeking external validation
Mhm.
and feedback. It's like that is always going to be a recipe for being triggered and being let down and disappointed. So just catching ourselves like evaluating ourselves based on likes or followers or interaction with so and so, or like it, and then going, okay, no, I got to feel how I'm feeling in my body, and it's about like authenticity, and am I being able to express my true self? And if I'm worried about disappointing this group of people, these are not my people. It's like
Exactly.
it's more important to be my full expressed self, than continue to effort to people please, because that's just exhausting and a dead end. I love this because this kind of speaks to that. You say any relationship that drains creative reservoirs without the tenderness to refill them, which is what you experienced with your mom, was
Mhm.
damaging to your psyche, your creativity, your sexuality. And I think that is so true. It's such a great gauge, because if we are in a relationship that we cannot express the gifts that we came in here to express, and we are drained rather than vitalized in this relationship. Of course, relationships take work. Men are from Mars, women are from Venus, or same-sex relationship. It's just relationships take work. But if you are being drained and you're not able to express your gifts, like something needs to shift. A conversation, a healing needs to occur. But that's such a good litmus. I love that. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, and this is a lesson that has taken a long time to learn. And I also want to point out that when you're in these certain relationships and you have them, like it takes time to heal. And working through trauma and all of these things, and it could be a friendship, a business relationship, all of that, I I would say just giving yourself grace. And also you speak about, you know, what people their opinions on you too. But I always say, just be a good damn person, be you, don't be an asshole, and just keep being you, because there's no way, and I know from my own experience, there is no happiness and joy unless you can authentically be yourself and have your voice. And just don't be afraid of that. And who cares about the followers or the this, or just you realize in life that you just want to find the joy.
Yeah. And I truly believe, I'm saying this out loud to remind myself, because tend to overthink and overcensor. And then I'm like, I hate social media because I'm the one exhausting myself trying to do it all right or look perfect or whatever. And I'm like, how do these other people just like post shit all day so easily and effortlessly? And I'm exhausted by it and drained because I'm overthinking, trying to be so diplomatic, or, you know, I don't know. But it truly is, when you are in your joy, that is what gives you vitality. And I was through some challenging things the last couple of months, and I felt I was being judged by this certain group of people that I cared about their opinions, and I was like, you know what? When you express your joy, you find your people. When you are being truly you, you're a magnet to your people that will resonate with that. And the quote that got me through that challenging time, and really out of reactivity, and just like drop in and trust and just be like, just be you, just be you, just be you. Your heart is pure. You don't need to worry about other people's judgments. They're going through their own process. Let them go through their own process. And my quote was, for those who understand you, no explanation is necessary. And for those that don't understand you, no explanation will suffice. So just you do you, and let everybody else do themselves,
Yeah.
regardless of how they treat you or what they say. It's like, you got to do you.
Who are these people? Do you need me to take my
I'm gonna call you.
yeah, tell me who they are. I was just having a girls' day 2 days ago. One of my friends was having a really bad month or so, and she texted me, and my trainer Sandy, shout out, and she's like, I need you both. I need my Amazonian woman to like work out, laugh. I'm like, okay, we'll get there. And then we were talking about how she's a well-known person, and all these people are just like hating on her and this and that. I'm like, I get that too. And she's like, but why would anyone talk bad about you? I'm like, because they don't know us. They don't know you in real life. It's this projection. It's, being in the public eye, it's hard. And she was like, who are they? I'm gonna
I know, girlfriends, friends, any friends. They like your tribe, it gets you through it, you know?
Yeah.
And then and what I learned was that it really got me out of reactivity and into surrender and acceptance, and just like so much more easeful to go through life that way, and really understand projection. Like they were projecting onto me because they were in fear, and they
Yeah.
have their whole cultural, societal, familial, whatever their thing is driving, their fear is driving them to need to blame someone, or throw their shit on me or throw their pain on me. And it's like, okay, I could react, defend, explain, and try to plead my case, but
Mhm.
it has nothing to do with me. It's all their own fear and their own process. Let them have their own process. And as I did that and sat in the discomfort of like people blaming or not liking me or whatever I was, projecting onto them, I got out of reactivity, and I was just like, no explanation will suffice. Just, and it was so liberating, you know?
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the only way to go. And honestly, at this point, I go back to be my quote, just be a good damn person. Don't worry. Um, I've had a lot of those people may come back around and realize that you do mean well and that they were projecting. That's
Yeah.
always a nice step in life when people come back around and apologize.
Yeah. Yep. And it's, yeah. You have in the back the lessons I have learned that might help you. If I mean, guys, if you just pick up the book and get the 4 pages in the back about the lessons I've learned, that may help you. I think it's worth it. Um, Forgiveness. You say, hate will eat you alive. It will destroy you. Forgive others even when they have been horrible to you. I have learned to forgive my mother for being mentally ill with paranoid schizophrenia. I have learned that everything in my life has been designed in a perfect way for me to achieve my very best. Her illness helped me to evolve and grow, and ultimately, I learned how to trust again. I love that. We can never, I feel like forgiveness is something that we're going to be unpacking and trying to understand our whole life, but you said it so beautifully.
Yeah, I have a lot of conversations about forgiveness on my podcast too, because some people are like, you can't keep forgiving because then it sets you up to like keep having people come in your life that you have to forgive. And I'm like, I don't forgive for the sake of the other people. I forgive for the sake of letting me move on without holding this guilt. Because, and my mother in particular, it was not her fault. I know that. I know she was unable to love me because of her mental disease. And so I had to forgive because I couldn't hold a grudge. I couldn't hold resentment anymore. And I just had to love her for who she was. And it took a long time because there was actually this one, I think my biggest forgiving moment was I was in therapy with my mom, and we would go to a psychologist together and then separate and come back together. And I was really trying to repair this mother-daughter relationship and this wound within me that I was like, now I'm going to have a mom. And the therapist is like, you realize she will never be able to love you the way that you want to be loved. Number one, because of her mental illness, her brain has not been able to develop. And in that way, and also she's a narcissist. I was like, oh, okay, got it. Had to do research on what narcissistic personality disorder was. This was like 5, 6 years ago.
Boy.
And I'm like, okay. And even sitting with my mom in her living room one night, and I was trying to catch up with her and was like asking her questions. I'm like, so what was happening when you were gone during this time? Like, what did you experience? She was in Alaska on a fisherman boat, and she has so many crazy stories. And I just wanted to learn more. And she was telling me stories, which I loved. And then I was like, do you want to know anything about me? And she's like, well, what? I was like, well, about my life, like when you were gone. She's like, well, I assume you and Rachel and Dad were just at home having family dinner, life as usual. I was like, wow. Like I had to let that sit in and be like, wow, like she's not capable. So forgiveness moment, instead of coming out with anger and being like, Mom, no, how could you think that? Then I was just like, yeah, I wasn't exactly like that, but I can understand. And she was in such horrific situations of being homeless and such. Like I had to just let this go. And I realized and I forgave. And I've learned in life when we talk about projection or other relationships where things are you're mentally abused or such, like let that go, because all that you have control of is your thoughts, your mind, how you react, and your choices. So I forgive a lot of people.
Wow. Well, look at you. You're glowing. It's so true. And it's just, it's for your peace and to stop, they took the person that wronged you, disempowered you for, however long of a period. And when you forgive, you're not condoning. It's like you're just no longer giving your power any more ounce of your attention, power, energy. Again, it's like you're not fighting a mental state that just can't exist in your mom.
Yeah.
What are your like spiritual beliefs? Is that too big of a question? Like, do you believe there's other lives that you've had different relationships with your mom? I don't know if you do any of the exploration of like past life regressions or intuitives that have told you that, or like, I don't know, because it feels so heartbreaking to not have the experience of that mother that you want. Like, how do you wrap your head around that?
um I've had to do a lot of parentification or reparenting, all that stuff, which I'm good with. And past lives, not with my mom. I haven't had anything show up there. Um, Supposedly in my past lives, I was like a slave somewhere. And then, which is so weird. So Deepak, I was at a retreat with Deepak and he did like a past lives regression meditation. And I literally like that came up. And then someone else said that. I was like, okay, this is really weird.
Wow.
But like I always just have like hard lives. And so they're like, this is why this life, you're good. Like you can handle anything. Spirituality, I believe that there is a higher power. I think the energy in earth and in nature, um that's, I was raised in a Christian family. um I believe that in nature.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, you talk about that a lot in your book, the healing power that nature provides, which I talk about as well.
Yeah.
How does that play into, so the big silence, the resources that you offer, what is that like? What are kind of the big issues that are coming up for you that you guys are dealing with and helping with and supporting? Like what's kind of the focus right now, and how are you guys helping?
Right. So on the Big Silence Foundation side, we have, I think our most important program is called Therapy for All. And that is for a scholarship for therapy. So we have our own network of therapists and we will pay for you to have therapy, because I find that it was so important for me. And even as a kid, I didn't have it. And health insurance a lot of time doesn't cover therapy, or therapists don't take health insurance. And we also have different types of therapists, and life coaches, and outside of like your typical talk therapy. So that is my favorite program, and the results that we've had from that. We have a crisis text line. Everything's at thebigsilence.com. You know, I and of course the podcast where I say one conversation can save a life, which is very true. And the work that we're doing, the amount of lives and testimonials of people who have come to us, and just opening up that conversation that no one wants to talk about. And we're just talking about it.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, I find that so many, I mean, are like, it's just I mean, is there still a stigma? Because I feel like that's all we're talking. It's May right now. It's Mental Health Awareness Month. Like, what is the stigma that you're seeing? Because so many people are talking about it, but there's obviously still so much isolation and shame. And then you see people, committing suicide that in the public eye that you assumed were like the happiest people on the planet, and that's like so shocking to people, but so many people are silently suffering.
Yeah. It feels like everyone's talking about it because that's the circle we run in. So our goal too is reaching out to like those mental health deserts where people don't talk about it. And even when I went on the book tour for the actual hardcover book, and we went across the country in the big silence bus and would stop in these mental health deserts. And that's the places that are kind of in middle America where no one's talking about mental health. And they'd see the big silence bus, and people would come out of, gas stations, fast food restaurants, and just want to sit and ask, what is this? And then they start talking about, oh, my husband is schizophrenic. I suffer from depression. Hold on, let me go get my coworker to come out here because he suffers from this. And so we think, because in our circles, we're all talking about it, but there's so many people who don't have the resources yet and who aren't comfortable talking about it until we can reach them and open up that conversation.
Yeah.
And suicide rates are at the highest. So how do we, stop that? And it's talking and making it comfortable with someone. I've got friends now who, because of what the work that I'm doing, are messaging me and saying, I'm not okay. I'm depressed. Can we do this? Like, people are reaching out, and no one used to reach out and do that. So there's a lot of work to be done still.
Yeah, it's so true. And it is, social media is a big part of the problem, but also it could be a beautiful tool as well, as people like you and like me, who people might look up to for certain things as we express our humanity and our imperfections or our moments of weakness. It gives permission for other people to reach out and say, like, oh, I'm not okay, or, inspire people to just stop isolating and really, it's okay to be human. It's okay to fall into a depressive state, you know?
Yeah, it is.
And
It happens.
it's
It
also
happens.
like unavoidable at this point. Yeah.
And also, with the big silence, I realize the importance of connecting in person too. And so we're doing more events coming up and in-person things, whether it's dancing, working out, meditating, talking, socializing, sharing stories, live podcasts, all those things. I think it's really important. And we're still coming off the pandemic, unfortunately, of isolation and just really learning how to connect again. And there are a lot of people that are still afraid to connect in person. And it's so important.
Yeah. And I love that you're saying dance and, you talk about it a little bit in your book, but as children, because of survival, because of stressors and parents' issues and their stress, like we abandon ourselves to fit in and to keep the peace and the things that make us joy and light us up. And I think that a lot of times people are in these relationships with themselves and the person they're with, and their creative cup, like you said, is just being drained. Or when you're not being yourself, when you're shutting off that natural inclination to play or be in joy or express the gifts that you have because you're trying to fit into a relationship or a society or whatever, that's what cuts off your vitality. That's what's going to bring you down mentally, and get depressed. So I do want to just call attention to that. Like, community is so important. Connecting in person is so important. And then also connecting to the joys, the things that brought you joy as a child, and playing and dancing and singing and writing and doing poetry or frolic in the ocean, nature. It's like, you talk about that a lot.
Yeah. No, I used to do that as a kid. I used to come home from school and do dance performances to nobody. Dance in my living room and pretend there was an audience. I would like choreograph to Paula Abdul and it's like those fun things. And so you still get that feeling. I just had last weekend or the weekend before, I had 15 women here at my house, and my friend Anya was a dance instructor, and we just danced, and everyone had so much fun. And like, wow, I didn't know I needed that.
Yeah. So funny. I was in this dance thing is timely as all my podcasts happen to give me answers that I need in the moment. But I was in a therapy session this week with a coach that I work with, and she was like, "Have you danced in a really long time?" Because I was kind of wound up and uptight and stressed out about something. And I was like, "No." She's like, "You need to dance." I'm like, "Okay." But it's true. Like, I just need to, so I was like kind of dancing in the shower this morning, and just like that little, we got to get that tension and that rigidity out of our body,
Mhm.
Uh-huh.
I,
All right. Let me know that next dance night you guys do.
I know everyone's like, Karina, when's the next one? I'm like, okay, sure.
Yeah. And it's so, whatever it is, making music with your friends, just cooking, whatever brings you joy and lights you up, whatever that quote is, that's what the world needs, is for you to, and that's all just reconnection to yourself. And yeah. So what else? What are you excited about sharing with the world? Are you creating something new? What are you?
I am. Some things I can't go to sign up for the newsletter at thebigsilence.com. There's
Okay.
lots of new things coming out, and and fun things like mental health doesn't have to be stressful or sad to talk about. And my point, like one of my goals is to open up that conversation and then also be able to have fun with it. Like, how do you feel? Maybe it's a dance party every month at my house where people can come to, or, events and talking and being able to laugh more, which is good for your mental health. Obviously, I have the audiobook with the bonus features coming out in June. I wanted it to be this month, but it'll be probably June. And yeah, there's with Tone It Up, we have our new workout program coming out for summer. That's at the end of May. So sign up for that if you want to move your body. I have new meditations in there. And yeah, lots of speaking stuff. If you are in Denver for NAMI, I'm speaking at the NAMI conference. So coming up, stuff, fun stuff like that.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah. I mean, that audiobook and the therapy session that follows is so cool. I've never heard of that. So, guys, get that audiobook by the Big Silence. This would normally be where I end, but this question came up, so I'm just going to go with my intuition here. As you were talking, there's a quote, and I forgot who it's by. Maybe it's by Lao Tzu. But it says something to the effect of, if you are in depression, you're living in the past. If you're in anxiety, you're living in the future. Obviously come back to the present moment. I feel every time I post that, I'm like, oh, it resonates. That's so true. But I feel like it might be triggering for people. What is your thoughts? What are your thoughts on that?
It depends. This is just my personal thought as you were just saying this. Depression living in the past. I mean, it depends on what kind of depression you have. Is it situational? Is it clinical? Because sometimes people just are depressed and you can't, pull yourself out of it. Maybe it is the past or the wishes and the wants. But then I don't know, gosh, this is a hard one, because I would say if I'm ever feeling down, and I actually was on the phone with someone today, a family member, and they were feeling down. I'm like, okay, what can you do for yourself today to feel good and give yourself permission to do that? And they were like, I just want to go walk in the park. I was like, walk in the park. It's amazing what, like, just doing little things to get yourself out of that hump. And when you think of you're depressed, okay, well, have you worked out? Are you hydrated? Did you meditate? Are you in nature at all? All of these little things that you don't want to do. And just making yourself do that, or calling a friend and making yourself. Now, anxiety, I agree. Anxiety is worrying about the future for sure. Because I have woken up when I've had to travel somewhere and I'm just like, this doesn't feel right. I don't want to do it. And I get debilitating anxiety, which I haven't for a year. So I'm going to give myself some praise for that. Woo,
Woo, that's awesome. That's
But,
big, by the way. That's huge. I think I had
huge.
anxiety yesterday. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's just certain changes in my life but that's a long-winded answer. I don't know if I actually answered it, but those were my immediate thoughts on depression and anxiety.
Yeah.
And even with depression too, if it's clinical, medication is fine. Like, some people need medication, and I know many people who are on medication and it's changed their life for the better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I agree. And I agree. You just mentioned that your life changed in some ways for the anxiety. So I want you to go a little deeper in that and give us one last nugget of like, how have you been able to, like, what are your tools, or what is your kind of switch once you feel that chest starting to tighten and you realize that you are in the future? How do you pull yourself back to center?
Oh yeah. And I know, I think it's because I can recognize it now and I've had enough experience with it. Chest tightening, left arm, vagus nerve, just like, whew, mine is in my stomach, where I've had it so bad that I throw up. And I think that was definitely, it hasn't happened in a long time. Number one, I know how to breathe now. I know when I recognize the symptoms and I'm like, this is what you're thinking about. Okay, go work out. Okay, go call a friend. Bobby will be like, one morning I had to travel to LA for a shoot. And I was like, I don't want to do it. I woke up just like, ugh. He's like, jump in a cold plunge, cold water now, meditate. I'm like, okay. It's just like those little, like, that's it. Like, you just got to snap yourself out of the future, worrying about the future, and get present again. And know, like you said, I am safe. I am safe. I repeat that to myself. I am safe right now. I'm healthy. I am safe. I'm healthy. I'm safe. I am loved. I am loved.
I love it. Well, can't think of a better way to end than that. I am healthy. I am safe. I am loved. I am loved. Thank you so much. All right. Well, one last time, where can they find you?
Instagram, it's Karena Dawn, or thebigsilence.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your story and this beautiful book and creating all of the tools and community that are helping so many people. And everybody, get The Big Silence and the audiobook so we can hear those awesome therapy sessions that follow. Thank you so much, Karena.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Heal with Kelly podcast. Be sure to tune in every Thursday for more empowering wisdom and inspiring healing stories. And make sure you hit the follow button on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts so you don't miss that one episode that holds the answer you've been searching for. Oh, and if you found this episode inspiring, please rate, review, and share Heal with Kelly so that we can grow our audience and reach more people. We truly appreciate it. Lots of love.